Welcome to another episode of Torah and Kabbalah. In this series, I will be presenting an interpretation of the Zohar as part of studying the Torah. The Zohar is a primary Kabbalist text comprised of discourses between a group of rabbis who lived around circa era 150. Throughout these discourses appeared the terminology of Kabbalah, as it was explained by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, whose claim was to have discovered the ancient texts of Kabbalah in a vault, and he was the only one who read and understood them. These texts of Kabbalah may have been the secret writings of King Solomon, who had them interred in his tomb. So Rashbi's story and the history of the Zohar proves to coincide with the known existence of other artifacts. The whereabouts of those ancient documents are not known today because they were not preserved beyond some copies and translations that are not entirely reliable. An additional point of potential archaeological evidence that validates the discourses of the Zohar and the science of Kabbalah are the artifacts known as Roman dodecahedrons. These brass and stone artifacts had 12 sides with holes and pentagonal shapes for every side. There were various designs with different markings, hole sizes, and other embellishments. These are examples of Partzufim, created by early Kabbalists who learned the teachings of the Zohar and the mystic powers of King Solomon by reading and studying the translations of captured texts. They were not devices used by Jewish mystics, but they were attempts by a dark cult of Kabbalists who thought they would have magical powers. Much of what is theorized about their purpose may actually be truthful, but the reason for their origin has been lost as a result of a ban on pagan religions. They were all from a time before the ban on the use of magical devices, around the 4th century circa era. The Roman dodecahedrons were three-dimensional representations of what is known as a Metatronic Chamber and the Partzufim structure of the Etz Chaim, Tree of Life. These artifacts are the physical representation of a mystical vision of the interaction and connection of the 10 Sefirot emanations from God's divine light. However, they are the opposing forms of a lower dimensional Metatronic chamber below the dimension of Malchut. They are the forms of a dark mystic art that failed because the information used to create them was a falsified translation of potentially the secret book of Solomon, which may be known as the Key of Solomon, the King. The original artifact of a Partzufim of Attic may have been in the tomb of King Solomon before it was plundered by the Assyrian king Nebuchadnezzar. The exact events of how those artifacts were removed and plundered is not completely known with any certainty because they were essentially stolen by tomb robbers after the sacking of Jerusalem during the first temple destruction before its rebuilding. The Ark of the Covenant was not recovered either, so there is widespread speculation and a plethora of theories about what happened to those legendary artifacts. The dodecahedrons were used in temples of the Gallo-Roman cults that attempted to recreate the powers of King Solomon. It was not a long-lasting cult because it proved to be false. There's really nothing perplexing about them other than being a design for a children's toy in modern times. It was childish to think that the power used by King Solomon could be evoked from a physical object. In this episode of Torah and Kabbalah, we find the opening of the discourse among the rabbis with Rashbi beginning the first verse in Shemot chapter 25. The Lord spoke to Moses, which is being at the Malchut, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, that they take an offering for me. From everyone whose heart makes him willing, you shall take my offering." While on the face of it, the statement is about charity, but the discourse refers us to Leah and Rachel, the wives of Jacob, who were sisters living in a state of conflict as rivals and opposites. Leah and Rachel are said to represent Bina and Malchut, respectively. Leah is Bina, who received the shape of Malchut, and Rachel is Malchut, who acquired the shape of Bina. One received, but the other acquired. Leah was given, but Rachel took. It may be said that Jacob took what Esau was to receive, and it was by Laban's trickery, similar to Jacob's, that Leah took what Rachel would have received if she had been Jacob's first wife. Esau would have received Isaac's first blessing if he had been the first to serve him dinner when he gave his first blessing to Jacob by the trickery of his deception. Leah bore all the sons of Jacob until Joseph was born to Rachel. Joseph ended the sibling rivalry of birthright by blessing his second son, Ephraim, instead of his firstborn, Manasseh, thus resolving the spiritual defect and achieving tikkun through a series of reincarnations. Despite not being the first blessed by Isaac, Esau acquired a blessing from him before he died. We must also consider that Abraham blessed Isaac, although there was another son born to Abraham before him. We can relate this revelation to the beginning of the Tirumah by considering these two worlds and how they are in conflict with each other. The world of Bina receives, but the world of Malchut acquires. The Lord told Moses to take an offering. Moses would acquire in Malchut by taking what the children of Israel would give him in Bina, and those physical offerings would be from their higher emanations of Chesed and Gevurah, which would ascend to Bina as their offerings when presented to the Lord. Giving in Bina. Giving is Bina when it is an offering from the heart, and it is Bina to receive offerings from the heart. God is not Malchut and does not take offerings. God is Bina and receives our offerings that are taken and acquired in Malchut from the 12 aspects that exist in the upper Malchut. See verse 4 in the Zohar. The reason I pointed out the Roman dodecahedron is that they had 12 sides. While there are 10 Sefirot, there are 12 aspects of loving kindnesses in Chesed. The explanation of all these 12 may be one of the secrets we uncover in this series, but I can presently say that there is a preponderance of available information about this concept of Chesedim, the loving kindnesses, on Chabad.org. I do not represent them, but I have found the content they provide to be highly respectable and worthy of study by all Jews. Just a brief aside here to show you the website and what you can find and discover in there. There's quite a bit of information. There's also information about Kabbalah and Hasidism and Jewish mysticism. So, there you go. Like I said, I don't represent them, but I do use their website, and the information that I get in these presentations is resourced from here. So, from their hearts, as each is willing, the Lord receives the offerings of the faithful, and the faithful acquire the many blessings from Hashem, who gives in return in many ways to help us meet our needs. All that Moses took from the Israelites as offerings to Hashem were received and repurposed to be formed into many parts of the tabernacle. All that the Lord received was given back to the Israelites in the blessings and greatness of his presence in the tabernacle when it was completed. None of them knew that what they gave would be used to bless them and their descendants for many years to come, and even through the reign of King David. Rashbi says in verse 8 that Bina and Malchut are both equal to He in Yud He Vav He, with Yud being the realm of supernal light and Vav being the physical world. Rashbi's revelation about the Tetragrammaton being composed of both Yud He as Bina and Vav He as Malchut describes the location of the connection between these two dimensions to be the first upper dot. He is not referring to the orthographic characteristics of the letters in Hebrew, but he is referring to the Partzuf of Attic, which I previously named Partzufim, based upon how I heard it spoken to me previously without knowing any particular spelling for it. The first upper dot in Malchut is Yesod. Rashbi describes this upper dot as having two aspects, a narrow path and a concealed way. My Partzufim shows this as Yesod ascending, which I consider the sealed way, and Yesod descending, which represents the narrow path. I also note that these are bidirectional flows of emanations from Bina and above to Malchut below, and vice versa. Yesod descending is the generality of all lights, meaning it is the illumination of the soul by its offering and giving of all those 12 aspects of loving kindness in the presence of Hashem, who is Sheshana, when we are practicing them in our lives as Jews. The secret of infinity, as Rashbi hints about, is the means by which our emanations of loving kindness for Hashem ascend at this first dot in the upper chamber of Malchut. The secret of infinity is that there is no time elapsed because it is instantaneous. Our emanations of loving kindnesses ascend instantaneously because the speed of infinity, unlike the speed of light, is instantaneous. The one light, which is the delight of delight, is the destination and source for all other lights, those being the emanations of the divine light of the Creator. The transference of emanations between the two dimensions at Yesod is bidirectional because it has these two aspects of being a narrow path in one direction and a concealed way in the other direction. It is a kind of control valve for the flow of emanations. The key characteristics of how it works as this flow control valve is that Yesod represents two key emanations that are inextricably tied to each other as the one, mercy and humility. One does not exist without the other. Is that it cannot receive mercy without giving loving kindnesses in humility, and loving kindnesses and humility will receive mercy in return. This is why Yesod is the bidirectional flow point as the top dot. Yesod is the gateway to Bina. Yesod is the gateway to Bina from the upper chamber of Malchut, but Sefirot is a gateway between the lower chamber in Malchut and the physical world of Asaya, where there is the foundational emanation of Malchut, that being the soul cloaked in the fleshy form of a body in Kalapa. Sefirot is also a bidirectional gate in my Partzufim. If you have seen any of my earlier episodes in this series, then you saw and heard me say that you can make your own Partzufim as a visual aid while you study the Torah and learn the secrets of Kabbalah to refine your practicum of prayer and meditation. There is no set formula for the arrangement of these dots that make up the face of your own personal Etz Chaim, and the Lord will guide each person differently with regard to the arrangement and sequence of these Sefirot in the Metatronic Chamber of your own Partzuf of Attic. You do not need to burn candles in it or make it three-dimensional the same as ancient heretics because it has no power in its creation. The power is all in the spiritual dimensions above the level of Sefirot, which is ascended from the foundation of Malchut. What descends from Sefirot to Malchut are the blessings that flow from Atzulit to Malchut when there is an opening in the gateway at Yesod with mercy and humility. In verse 20, Rashbi quotes Shir HaShirim, chapter 3, verse 9. But he is not really talking about a palanquin for what that really is. The Ark of the Covenant was formed in a design similar to a palanquin because it is carried by bearers who support it by means of two horizontal poles. And this segment of the Shemot is the beginning of the design descriptions of the Ark and the tabernacle, which was portable. Making a palanquin then becomes equated with the making of the tabernacle and the Ark of the Covenant. Rashbi is really talking about another point in the Partzuf of Attic, in that it has four corners, which are just said, Gevurah, Sefirot, and Malchut. By this description, it would seem that the structure at this lower point of the Etz Chaim is a diamond shape, with four corners oriented like the 4 points on a compass. The cardinal directions he uses in verse 22 are irrelevant to any real directions, but they are correct in their orientation for the Sefirot in my Partzufim. Sefirot and Malchut are opposite each other as north and south, and Chesed and Gevurah are opposite each other as east and west. They are not oppositional emanations, but they are the points of balance between and among them, as though they were a top spinning with Malchut being the base of the top and Sefirot being the top of it. The middle that spins to keep it all balanced is made of Chesed, loving kindnesses, and Gevurah, the severity of judgment for oneself and others. These combinations of Chesed, Gevurah, and Sefirot, and Malchut are like the scales, base, and balance point. The parable of a balsam tree might not be one of Rashbi's best, but the best part about that parable is his naming of these Sefirot and how they are on the opposite sides of each other. This revelation says that balancing the beauty of the Torah, which is Sefirot above Malchut, with the loving kindnesses of Chesed and the severity of judgment in Gevurah, enable ascension to the higher chamber in Malchut, where there is the balance of Hod, Nesach, and Yesod, with these lower emanations balanced as the base in Malchut. When these upper three emanations become balanced, then Bina becomes accessible. The benefit of ascending from Malchut to Bina by balancing the lower Sefirot is to acquire knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. The remainder of this part of the Shemot reveals the tabernacle's construction characteristics. There is some consideration in our modern perspectives of how these components of the tabernacle were electrically conductive, to include the acacia wood, which is semiconductive. I challenge you to read through the remaining description of the tabernacle's construction and its components while considering how it would potentially be able to conduct electricity. The discovery of electricity cannot truthfully be attributed to Benjamin Franklin, because there are ancient artifacts from Egypt and Assyria that indicate an understanding of electrical energy. The pictographs of eels inside of a bottle-like container in a pyramid and the discovery of electrolytic batteries that date back to the Sumerian civilization in Mesopotamia are two examples of early known discoveries of electrical energy. The truth about electricity is that it is one characteristic of the dimension of light, of the three dimensions refracted from the hard spark of creation. Light in all forms of refracted energy is one dimension. Space as the dimension of all distances between bodies of mass as separated or combined by energy, and mass as the physical dimension that creates time by movement in response to energy in the forms of gravity and light. As you read and consider the descriptions, ask yourself the question, could this have been a technological device that was similar to a lightning rod that would hold God's spiritual energy for a temporary time, where the Lord dwelled therein during their passage? Consider what the tabernacle really was. It was the dwelling place of the Lord as the Israelites traveled. Nearly all of its parts were conductive, semiconductive, or insulating, and those who entered had to walk barefoot. 2 men were killed when they made strange fire. What was the strange fire? That secret has never been told. So I will let the Lord tell you when you meditate and pray to have that revealed to you. Can you reach Bina? Send me a comment to tell me what you found out. I will see you next time here on Torah and Kabbalah, a study of the Zohar and its secret teachings of the Torah. I am